Thank you for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Efrem Graham. Ahead today, Iranians pushing ahead with their fight to bring down their Islamic rulers, with one analyst calling it, quote, a full-on war by the people against the regime. And the Islamic government is fighting back with a report of rivers of blood in Tehran as the protesters call out the West and President Donald Trump for help. Here at home, we're going to look at how chaplains at Arlington National Cemetery help America to honor its fallen heroes. And we're going to hear about a program to help children who are dealing with trauma. All those stories and more right now on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
It is Tuesday, the 13th of January. I want to begin this half hour in Iran, where millions are keeping up their fight to overthrow the Islamic regime. And amid the violence, the United States State Department has issued a travel advisory saying, do not travel to Iran for any reason. U.S. citizens in Iran should leave immediately. That warning comes as Iranians are calling out for help from the rest of the world. Chris Mitchell brings us the story now. He's reporting from Jerusalem.
Despite a nearly total internet blackout, foreign militias enlisted to fight the protesters, and live fire on the streets, Iranians continue to fill cities throughout the country with their call for freedom. Juliana Tamourazi, who heads a ministry to Iraqi Christians, was born and raised in Iran, and many members of her family are still there. She says the protesters are continuing to make a call to the West.
Please come and help us. The next few hours are absolutely critical. Their eyes are on Israel. Their eyes are on America. They're begging, they're pleading with us to assist.
Most protesters are looking to President Trump for help. On Monday, he imposed a 25% tariff on nations that trade with Iran, with more options on the table. Today, the president meets with his national security team to discuss options.
Diplomacy is always the first option for the president. He's told all of you last night that what you're hearing publicly from the Iranian regime is quite differently from the messages the administration is receiving privately. And I think the president has an interest in exploring those messages. However, with that said, the president has shown he's unafraid to use military options if and when he deems necessary. And nobody knows that better than Iran.
The U.S. has warned all Americans to leave the country. Iran says they're ready for talks with the U.S. based on mutual respect, but there are no details on their offer. Some warn the regime is simply buying time to crush the protests. Reports from inside the country say the death toll is staggering.
My sources have been telling me that it's a slaughterhouse. There are rivers of blood. That's what my source was saying in Tehran alone. A lot of the regime's forces have been perched on top of buildings and in many cases mowing down people from above. Snipers from inside of buildings have been shooting protesters.
Iranian-American journalist Karmel Melamed tells CBN News the mosques have become flashpoints.
They're targeting the mosques and some of these Islamic centers because the regime and the IRGC thugs are using them as bases of operation, command and control.
Melamed says that war is escalating.
Literally millions pouring out on the streets. People are saying, this is it. We're at the end of the rope. We're at the end of the line. And the question that I keep getting from folks in Iran is, President Trump, you've said you're going to come and help us. We're getting slaughtered. Where are you? Where is America? Where is Israel?
Despite the perils, the protesters believe this is the final battle.
There's a lot of hope. They're saying, we're not giving up. We've got nothing to lose. They've got a finite number of bullets, but our numbers of people are way higher.
Tamourazi says at this hinge of history, Iran and its people need prayer.
We must pray for the safety of these young men and women that are imprisoned. Pray for the families of the deceased. Pray for those that are brave, that have taken to the streets. We must pray for divine wisdom, for Bibi Netanyahu, for European Parliament, for President Trump.
And Chris Mitchell joins us now from Jerusalem with more. So, Chris, how high are some of the estimates of those killed by the regime?
Well, as that Iranian-American journalist said, the numbers seem to be staggering. Iran International, that's a media outlet that's associated with the Iranian opposition, broadcast out of the UK. They're actually saying as many as 12,000 people have died or been killed in the current wave of protests, most of them last Thursday and Friday when that media blackout began, when the internet was shut down. And that's from their different sources, including Iran's Supreme National Security Council, the presidency, medical staff, and eyewitnesses. Some are calling it the deadliest episode in Iran's modern history. To some, it feels like what happened in 1989. That was the crackdown by the Chinese in Tiananmen Square. That's when they used heavy force, mass arrest. And even right now, we're hearing reports that the Iranian officials, security officials, are taking wounded out of the hospitals and arresting them, knowing that if they're wounded, they probably weren't part of the protest. Now, the difference in the between what's happening now in Tiananmen Square in China and Beijing in 1989 is that these protests are spread throughout the country. They're not just in one central location, so it might be much harder for the regime to crush this rebellion. And here's a couple of statements from German Chancellor Metz. He says, we're witnessing the end of the Iranian regime. And Senator Lindsey Graham said, and he said this just last night, apparently, before the night is over, may the people of Iran be free from their oppression. He's expecting a U.S. attack at any moment.
What are some potential targets for a U.S. strike, and what impact could that have?
Well, first of all, they could attack the Bajis. These are the shock troops that are out there in the streets. They're responsible for security, and they're infamous for their brutality. That's one target. They could go after government facilities, the parliament, state television and radio, even the presidential palace. They could go after infrastructure, oil refineries, depots, airports, and seaports. And they could target the regime leadership, the IRGC commanders, the supreme leader, the president, members of the assembly, all part of the regime infrastructure. And all these targets, what they will mean if these targets will determine whether or not, the regime may be able to survive. And that's going to be determined what President Trump decides, perhaps even today, what he's going to do. And if he attacks all of these targets, it's likely that the regime will have to fall because they won't have any, leadership or the infrastructure they'll need to continue the country. So very pivotal moment, Ephraim. That's why so many people feel it's so important to be praying for that divine wisdom, as Juliana said in our report, for wisdom for President Trump.
Chris, what's the significance of the internet blackout?
Very, very critical, Ephraim. It's one of the regime's powerful weapons against the protesters. If they don't have the internet, it's like their lifeline. It does allow them to organize, coordinate with each other. They can warn each other about security officials. They can share those videos of abuses with the outside world, and they can stay connected to the international media, to human rights groups. So when the regime shuts these down, it's not just about censorship. It's about isolating the people trying to break the momentum of the rebellion and hide the brutality. So this is a classic sign of the regime being afraid of these protests. And so that's why they're trying to cut these communications so the protests can't spread from city to city.
Some Iranians have been able to call out of the country. What are they saying?
Well, what they're saying is a heavy security. Some of the banks and government offices have already been burned down. They're all concerned about a U.S. military strike. And part of this is driven by the youth. They're saying they're hopeless, but they're talking about continuing the protests on a tactical level. The security people are looking for those star-like terminals which actually connect to the internet. And so that's all part of what's happening on the ground right now inside Iran.
Have there been calls for prayer in Israel and the Middle East for the situation there in Iran?
Yeah, all over, I would say, around the body of Christ, around the world, Ephraim, looking at what's happening right now here locally, the ICEJ, the global prayer, they have a daily prayer. The Iraqi Christian Relief Council, as Juliana said, they're asking for prayer. Ministries like Transform Iran, Iran Alive, Sukkot Hallel, that's a 24/7 prayer ministry here in Jerusalem. CBN's calling out for people to pray. So almost every ministry that's connected to Iran or the Middle East have been praying because people know the consequences of what's happening here in Iran is historic. Some say it's maybe bigger than the fall of the Berlin Wall, and it has biblical and even prophetic implications.
Busy week already. What do you have for us this evening on Jerusalem Dateline?
Well, updates on the latest of what's happening inside Iran. We have an interview with Eli Kohanim. She's an Iranian-born American journalist and former official with the Trump administration. We're talking to her about what's going on inside Iran. We have an interview with Che An. He's a pastor in Pasadena, and he's running for the governorship of California. We talked to him, and we also have a report on an anti-Semitism conference in Italy trying to address the global rise of anti-Semitism and how the church can combat it.
All right, our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, thank you as always for your insights. Looking forward to checking back in with you in the days ahead this week. I want to remind you can get the latest from Jerusalem Dateline at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can find it on the CBN News channel. You can also find it on the CBN News app, and it's available on YouTube as well. America has also experienced its share of warfare over its history. We're going to take you to Arlington National Cemetery, where heroes are laid to rest and chaplains share the hope with the living. We're going to have that story for you when we come back. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. Honoring fallen heroes is a sacred trust at Arlington National Cemetery. Chaplains who serve the convey of the nation's gratitude, who serve to convey the nation's gratitude and guide families through their deepest grief. CBN's Brody Carter brings us their story.
I'm not sure that there's ever been another place that has underscored honor to me more than Arlington National Cemetery. Honor shows up as a theme throughout Scripture, right? From honoring your mother and your father to our elderly to God Himself. But we stand beside and work with young men and women of the Air Force Honor Guard and the Air Force Band who guard that honor. That's what they're professionally trained to do. And then we turn around and help articulate that.
Arlington is one of the more than 170 national cemeteries. This hallowed ground for America's heroes carries out up to 28 military funerals each day.
I'm dual-hatted in that moment. I view my role as both part of the Air Force's ceremonial honor to express the gratitude of our nation for the service of that service member, that veteran, and also as a pastor. Based on their faith tradition, the family's invited us into that moment. And so while we as chaplains are navigating the ceremonial precision and expectation of Arlington Cemetery and what we do here, we're also there to help pastor that family through a moment of grief.
With more than 430,000 souls laid to rest across these 640 acres, the emotional weight is constant.
A sobering reminder to lean on my own faith, to lean on the hope that I have in Christ, and to be able to walk in that, sometimes having the opportunity to express that verbally, sometimes, many times, just by being a presence in the room and saying nothing at all.
Captain Andrew Lloyd, a Regent University graduate and one of 6 Air Force chaplains here at Arlington. He and other chaplains tell CBN News faith isn't a shield from the pain, it's the anchor within it.
There is a heavy burden of grief, right? And so we bear witness to folks' grief every single day. And it is such an honor and privilege for me, but it can be a heavy burden as well. And so I definitely have to rely heavily on my faith and prayer, and then laying their grief at the foot of the cross every night and giving that back to God and trusting that they are in His care.
Yet while walking beside grieving military families, they say their own faith is tested and shaped in a way that better helps them serve those who are searching for meaning in the face of loss.
I believe my role as the chaplain is to be that conduit of God's grace and presence. And so it's a compassionate, comforting, steady presence. It's the balance of military formality and also God's grace. And so just a reminder of both of those things, speaking God's truth and promises, and then also standing with them in their moment of grief. And it's such a tender moment of committal.
Before life as a military chaplain, Shannon Demaray pastored a Colorado church for 15 years. Today, she officiates up to 6 funerals per day, allowing her to share the love of God with grieving military families and also remember what each marble stone represents.
I think each headstone here at Arlington is a reminder that life is precious, that each person represents the image of God, and that every story is so important, both to the fabric of our country and our nation's history, but also to their loved ones and the people they've known along the way.
I think we're all searching for meaning every day, but when they come out here, they have the opportunity to do it on a space that our nation has set aside to say is sacred and is hallowed.
From this sacred space dedicated to sacrifice, chaplains carry a message for the living. The true strength is not having answers, but in showing up with faith, regardless of where the battle may rise. I'm Brody Carter reporting in Arlington, Virginia, CBN News.
Still ahead, a proven way to help children who are suffering from trauma. We're going to hear about that important program right after this. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. Parenting is especially hard. It's especially difficult when dealing with children who are struggling with trauma or attachment issues. On this week's edition of Healthy Living, Matt Obert, author of Beyond Trauma Care, discusses the Christ-centered program at Chaddock. It is a proven system that helps children. Take a look.
The National Clearinghouse that recognizes practices that are informed by evidence that show true success and structure in working with children and families. And so we are proud to be a part of that list and being recognized that our practice does indeed have the evidence to support its use.
And I really love the fact that you say this really does work, because when you talk about the type of kids that you deal with, that these parents are dealing with, a lot of people say they can't be helped. And what we're often talking about are children who have been adopted, not as babies, but as older children, and have terrible trauma from their birth family. And a lot of these adoptions, not all, but a lot, are from other countries, correct?
That is correct. You know, there's a lot of countries that, because of war, because of internal conflict, have really had children be separated from their primary caregivers early in life. And those children did not have the protection and the felt safety necessary to allow their brain to develop in the healthy way. And that's the thing that we help families understand, that trauma impacts brain. And we know from the ACEs study that was done in the 90s that adverse childhood experiences can have long-term impact on not only the mental health, but the physical health of children. And so we know that trauma really, and that lack of healthy attachment early on, really impacts how the brain itself develops. And that's where our program comes in, is to help families understand that and then guide that rewiring of the brain with the child.
You have different levels of care at Chaddock, and one of your most, I guess, serious levels is the residential care, where you actually, a child comes and lives at Chaddock for a year, year and a half, correct?
That is correct. And so we actually have a residential campus located here in Quincy, Illinois, in which children come and live with us, as you said, for 12 to 18 months. And during that time, we really engage the family, the adult caregivers in our treatment program. And really the first step of our treatment is to recognize that many of these children continue to live in their back brain, which is built for survival. And that because of that, the brain has not allowed them to move upward into that midbrain, which we call the area of emotions, where connections really take place. And so what we do here at Chaddock is the first stage is really creating felt safety, not just physical safety, but emotional safety and trust. And that healing doesn't just happen in therapy sessions. It happens in the daily experience throughout the day. It doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in relationships.
And one of the things that I found really fascinating on your website was you said, look, parents, here's sort of a checklist to know if your child can do residential care or other types of care where they still live at home. And one of the ways that you sort of screen patients is if the parents feel afraid for their own safety or other siblings within the home are afraid for their own safety. That's pretty serious, right?
It is. I mean, unfortunately, because a child that's been impacted by this traumatic event or maybe multiple traumatic events early on and has not had the ability to have form that higher level brain functioning of connection and regulations, they can also outwardly display their trauma through some serious aggressive behaviors that can really put a family at risk, put other individuals at risk, and put the child at risk themselves. But I think it's important to understand that that's not a child necessarily being bad.
And you can learn more about Beyond Trauma Care by checking out this week's edition of Healthy Living. You can find it on the CBN News Channel at 2:30 and 8:30 Eastern. You can also see it on the CBN News app, and it's available on YouTube as well. Stay with us. We're coming right back with an encouraging word for your Tuesday. Time now for your Tuesday Tweetable. This is a message I pray encourages you, and I hope you'll post, tag, tweet, and share it with those in your circles of influence. If you aren't seeing what you're believing, remember this: God's promise is in process. Work while you wait, and remember, the process will kill your impatience and awaken your character. With that word, again, I remind you, work while you wait, and make this a terrific Tuesday. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. I want to remind you, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time as well as online. That address is cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can reach out and touch us on Facebook, Instagram, and X. We look forward to seeing you right back here, same time tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye and God bless.